The Masters 8 tournament, what should have been a monumental battle of champions, ended up turning out to be a monumental fumble. What should have held so much weight for the characters ended up being little more than flashy spectacle. Here is how the Pokemon anime ended up writing one of the worst leagues to date. Hey Pokemon champions, I'm Champion Blaze and welcome to the Sacred Legends podcast, your number one place to chill and unwind with the Pokemon anime. And today, I got a good one for you today because we are talking about the Masters 8 tournament. Last time we spoke about the Kalos League and how that is more of a rushed league and not as good as we remember. Today, let's talk about a league that we definitely remember to be bad, and that is the Masters 8. What should have been so profoundly narrative driven, what should have been so profoundly heavy with character development, emotion, weight, and dynamics and relationships ended up being just surface level league battles and very shallow, if we're being quite honest. Now, the Masters 8 also did suffer from back-end production issues, and while that does play a part in it, it mainly comes down to the writing of Pokemon Journeys, and let's start with the very first episode of the Masters 8 tournament arc. It's a 13 arc, league, but beginning with episode 1, we immediately see the trajectory of how this league is going to go and how good or bad it is going to end up being. Let's just begin with the very first few moments we get, and that is the introduction of Hop. Hop is, of course, Leon's younger brother. He is somebody that looks up to his older brother, and Hop wants to be a great trainer, like his brother. It's a very relatable thing, to have a younger sibling idolize, in a sense, the older sibling. But why are we just now seeing Hop? Why hasn't Hop been introduced much sooner in the series? Of course, it's an Ash-focused series, and we've been focusing on Ash and Go, but at this point in the series, Hop serves no purpose. Hop literally is introduced just to say he's a fanboy of Leon, and also just to lose to Ash and then cheer Leon on for the duration of the tournament. And while that's good and all, he's serving his in-game role, they could have done more with Hop. Why introduce a character? Why waste this 5 minutes or so of this introductory episode for this massive league that we have been building to with the entire series? Why introduce Hop if he's not going to do anything? I could see if they introduced Hop and they gave him some sort of purpose. If they gave him something to do beyond just cheering and losing to Ash, which, mind you, his Wooloo gets one shot with Iron Tail. That is such disrespect. I know Ash is super strong, and, we hardly ever see Ash knock out a Pokemon with just one hit like that. But come on, why introduce Hop just to disrespect him like that? It would have been better if they just didn't introduce him at all and used that additional 5 minutes we no longer spend on Hop to have more interactions with the actual champions that we're here for and that matter. Now let's fast forward after this, and we get to the locker room where we do see all the champions. Ash and Iris run in, and we see all the champions. But why are they just standing around, not really doing much of anything? Everyone gives Ash and Iris this very serious and deadpan look when they enter the locker room, and I've never understood this look. I've never understood why they're all so serious, and no one really says hi when they enter the room. Now, that's not to say that they just be staring at Ash and Iris. It's just the fact that they don't say anything at all, and we cut to the opening ceremony. I wish we had more interactions between all the champions. That is something that is also another Journey's L, as we say in the anipoke community. But when we get to the opening ceremony, I think it's really great. I think the dramatization, the hype, the weight, that these are all world-level champions, I think is really good. That opening ceremony is really good. Identifying the achievements and status and rank of every single champion that we've come to know and love over the last, 20 plus years, I think is really good. And ending it off with Leon's introduction really sets the tone that these are the strongest trainers in the world, and Leon is the strongest and everyone wants to beat him. However, there is a problem within the opening ceremony, and it happens as soon as Alan is introduced and as soon as all of the introductions have finalized. So we don't even get any interaction between Ash and Alan. These two characters that have had so much history between them in the XYZ anime, such a fierce rivalry, such a almost battle of ideals, if you will. You know, Alon needing to enjoy battling more, Ash needing to also enjoy battling more and not be so focused on winning. But the only thing we get is this slight head nod between the two of them. And I've never understood why we couldn't have more interactions. It's as if, and funny enough, there are tweets about this all over Twitter. It's the XY erasure. It's like they didn't want to acknowledge Ash and Alon's rivalry in a sense. Like they just wanted to sweep it under the rug. They even retcon ash-greninja, which is absolutely insane. To this day, I don't fully understand the need for this like XY erasure, this retcon, and I just don't. Why try to erase such a great part of anipoke history like that? The next thing comes right after this slight acknowledgement between the two, and that is the matchups that we get. Now, it's not like they're the worst matchups, but they leave a lot to be desired. The best matchup is, of course, Iris versus Cynthia. I think that's the one that we can all agree upon, which is that Iris should battle Cynthia to see how far she's come on her journey, how much she's grown, how much she's progressed towards reaching her goal of being a Dragon Master, and, to see how she stacks up against Cynthia. And I think that's a really good matchup. But then we see that Leon needs to battle Alon. Now, of course, we all know, okay, whoever fights Leon in the first round is going to lose. Whoever battles Leon in the semifinals is going to lose. It's just very predictable because the entire series is leading to Ash versus Leon. So we know these two can't lose in the first round or in the semifinals. However, there is a thing in writing where even you want a certain level of predictability because it keeps the reader or the viewer intrigued in your story. You need a certain level of predictability. That way people can guess, see what's going to happen, and then it's always fun to see if your predictions and your, predetermined outcomes actually come to pass. If they come to fruition. Did you think correctly? Did you guess correctly? It's always fun to think about. But you want a certain level of uncertainty. And, that's fine and all with the matchups that we got. It's just that the way all of these are executed, they leave a lot to be desired because the only really good battle of the first round is Iris versus Cynthia. But before we get into that, let's begin with the actual first battle that we do get, which is Alon versus Leon. Alright, so with Leon versus Alon, it's not bad that this matchup happened. It would have been great to see Mega Charizard X versus Gigantamax Charizard. That is a dream that we had with this matchup before the episode came out. And what did we get? Leon busts out Gigantamax Rillaboom. Now, not to say it's a bad choice, but maybe we're just diving into fanfic territory and, the idea of Mega Charizard X versus Gigantamax Charizard. Maybe that's just a fanfic idea. And I do enjoy the surprise factor to see that Leon owns more than just Gigantamax Charizard. He has other Gigantamax Pokemon. So it is a nice surprise factor. And, it really gets the viewer off guard. Like, oh, Leon isn't going to use Gigantamax Charizard. Okay, he's using something else. So that's a good idea. I'm not mad about the surprise factor. What is really bad about this battle? And, I will say that it is one of the worst battles in anipoke history. It is a top 10 worst battle. I'm not trying to glaze the XY anime. I'm not trying to defend the XY anime. Maybe a little bit. But what I am trying to say is that this whole tournament beginning to end just magnifies, solidifies, and really puts into perspective the very atrocious writing of Pokemon Journeys. There has been a writing problem since episode 1, and it really comes to the forefront with the execution of the Masters 8 tournament. So, firstly, let's discuss the 3 Pokemon Alon used. He has Chestnut, Malamar, and Mega Charizard X. Okay, fine, not bad. Only question is, Where are his other Pokemon? This dude owns a Metagross. This dude owns a Tyranitar. Why not bring your pseudos to a league where the best of the best are going to be battling? Why would you not do that? Why would you bring these seemingly new Pokemon? We don't know their track record. We don't know their battle history. We're not even attached to them in any way. The only thing that gives Chestnut a reasonable pass is that maybe he caught his own Chespin after bonding with Marin. You know, Marin or Chespy maybe inspired Alon to go get his own Chespin. Okay, fine. It's passable. Why do you have a Malamar? Why? There was no need for Alon to come into this tournament with new Pokemon just for the sake of having new Pokemon. It's not like this tournament happened in Legends ZA timeline where, okay, maybe he's going to use Mega Malamar, maybe he's going to use Mega Chestnut. You know, there's none of that. There was no need for him to have new Pokemon. Now, I'm glad Alon beat Rillaboom because Rillaboom is one of the most cracked Pokemon in the entire anime. Me and my friend Luop actually determined that Leon's Rillaboom is the strongest grass type in the entirety of the Pokemon anime in this video that we made, quite a while ago. And one, that speaks volumes that we included it in a ranking like that. But two, for Mega Charizard X, not even Mega Evolved, to defeat Rillaboom, I think that says a lot. And he did really good with his Chestnut against Rillaboom as well. But then it all goes downhill from there. The second Charizard hits the field, he loses Malamar with a point-blank Fire Blast, and then can't even get my sentences out because this battle is so bad. Let me just get my tea. Oh my goodness, that's good stuff right there. But when we're discussing Mega Charizard X versus Leon's Charizard, it's no wonder that in the Pokemon discourse online and the anipoke community, it's no wonder that many fans consider it to be such a disrespectful battle. Let me break it down for you. Alon, even though he is not the strongest trainer in the world, he is ranked number 6, right behind Diantha. Alon has a phenomenal track record. Most trainers can't even touch a track record like this. Aside from people like maybe Ash. But Alon has gone up against Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre, Mega Rayquaza. He has defeated 10 Mega Evolved Pokemon in a row, barely any rest in between, back-to-back in a slew of a gauntlet, and he came out on top. He has battled Elite Four Malva and won. He has battled Elite Four Seabold, lost but did good damage. He's not a weakling by any means. Then you have his Mega Charizard X has gone up against Zygarde. It helped out against the Moving Monolith in the Team Flare arc. Now, with that track record in mind, should a Pokemon like Mega Charizard X be one-shot by a single Dragon Pulse from a vanilla Charizard that has not even Gigantamaxed or undergone Mega Evolution? You let me know in the comments. Let me know if a Mega Charizard X, even though it's weak to Dragon Pulse because it's now part Dragon type, should it be one-shot, keyword one-shot, by a Dragon Pulse? I can hear you typing no. I can hear you typing a lot in the comments right now that this is an atrocious battle. This is absolute slander to the XY anime. It's what makes it so bad. It's just the level of disrespect that the writers were willing to go to in order to showcase that, yeah, Leon is the strongest trainer. Ain't nobody gonna beat him. Nobody can touch him. Nobody can surpass him, except for our main character. I don't have a problem with Leon. People will always defend this battle saying, oh, someone's gotta lose to Leon. Someone's gotta be the Leon fodder. It just happened to be Alon. They said Leon is the strongest trainer in the world. It makes sense that Alon wouldn't beat Leon. I'm not saying that's an issue. I'm not saying that's what the issue is. Yes, somebody had to lose. It could have been it could have been Lance. It could have been Diantha. It could have been Steven. It could have been anybody. Someone was going to lose to Leon, and we all knew that going into this tournament, that two people were going to lose to Leon. It's the execution of this battle, and I feel that's what people don't understand about this battle. Listen, Alon, I gave you his track record. He is phenomenal, but he gets one shot by a Dragon Pulse. Alon won the Lumiose Conference. He won the Kalos League. He is champion level. Okay, that's another thing. Now, we've seen other Champions and Elite Four members like Flint and Lance prior in the series lose to Leon. Their Pokemon were not one-shot, though. That's the thing. None of their Pokemon were one-shot. And with Flint, while the battle was shorter, we can likely assume that the battle lasted a little longer than what was on screen because it was already in process when they jumped to the battle. So nobody else got one-shot, not even Raihan of, the Galar League being the strongest gym leader in Galar, not even he was one shot. But let's bring in Alon, who's champion level, battled Mega Pokemon, and let's disrespect him to an absurd and egregious level. It just stings. To this day, we can all get past Ash losing to Alon, in the Kalos League finals. But if people are still upset that, myself included, that Alon lost the way he did to Leon, if people don't understand that, I think it's you fail to understand the history of the Pokemon anime, and I think you fail to understand execution. It's not about what was written, it's about how it was written. And Alon's loss was written in the most disrespectful way, making his Mega Charizard X of all Pokemon, which we deemed, I believe, the strongest dragon type in the Pokemon anime in that same video. It's just not acceptable. And it's also rushed. It's also rushed because we get the introduction of the Masters 8 tournament, the introduction of Hop, and the first round 1 battle all in one episode. The beginning of the Masters 8 has no room to breathe. It has no sense of pacing. And that is a big reason that the rest of the league is just written so poorly. They could have fixed it after this first episode, but they didn't. Literally, what is this? The Kalos League? I spoke about how the Kalos League was rushed. How, they crammed so much into the first 2 episodes and then boom, we're in the semifinals. Yes, after Alon versus Leon, all the other battles get full time dedicated to them. But why not do that for the first one? Alon doesn't even get to have a full proper episode dedicated to his own battle. He literally just shows up to lose to Leon. And it's disrespectful. And I can't defend that. I can't defend that. It's a Journey's L. It's bad. And while, Masters 8 was written poorly for the entirety of the series, and again, there's back-end production issues, but you have an introduction of a 13-episode league arc, the tournament to end all tournaments nonetheless, and you start off like this. You start off introducing a character we didn't need, you rush the introduction of the champions, and you rush the first round 1 battle, and disrespect such an amazing legacy character nonetheless. There's no way to defend Alon versus Leon. I've yet to find any way to do so. I do not think there is a way to do so. And it is just poor execution from the Pokemon writing staff. That's all there is to it. But what they really nailed, let's move on and talk about Iris versus Cynthia. Iris versus Cynthia is hands down the 3rd best battle in the entirety of the Masters 8 tournament. It is absolutely fantastic beginning to end. I think it holds the narrative weight well. I think it holds the development of these characters well. And I think it really shows off Iris's growth as a Dragon Master from Black and White up until now. Iris uses Excadrill, Dragonite, and Haxorus. And while Dragonite doesn't, do much, I think it showed off a decent amount of strength. But really, Dragonite had to go down because we need to highlight Haxorus. Haxorus is the star here, not Dragonite. Dragonite got enough shine in Black and White. And Haxorus and Excadrill got their time to shine as well in the Black and White series. More so Excadrill. Excadrill fought so much. Now is the time for Haxorus to come in and do some damage. Cynthia, we already know, is strong, and she's using Gastrodon, Milotic, and Garchomp. And the reason that this battle is so damn good, the reason we were so receptive of it, is because, 1, we get the entire episode to spend with these 2 women, and the battle is not rushed. Maybe rushed a little bit, but, I think it was substantial what we got. And the only thing that drags this episode down, in my opinion, is Ash's reaction to Iris, which we'll see later. But Excadrill gets a knockout, uh, I believe, against Gastrodon, and that's great. That's a win. That's a win right there, right off the bat for Iris, and I think that's really good. For Iris to get the first win when she couldn't even touch Cynthia in black and white, kudos to her. Kudos to her. She did fantastic. That's really good. She trusted Excadrill, she leaned into Excadrill's power, and they came out on top against Gastrodon. Well done, Iris. Then Milotic gets the field and knocks out both Excadrill and Dragonite. And we don't talk about the Iron Head animation. We really don't. It's nasty. Very bad. But then Haxorus hits the field, the star of the show. And I love Haxorus's moveset. We have Breaking Swipe, we have Psycho Cut, Outrage, and Dragon Pulse. And she battled her heart out. She is the Unova champion, which was displayed earlier on in the series in Ash's Speak, man. Speak your words. Ultra class battle. Might have been the great class, actually. But we've seen Haxorus battle before, and it is a fantastic battler. Of course, we see that it can slam its head into the ground to knock out and nullify the confusion aftermath from using Outrage. And Haxorus knocks out Milotic with one Breaking Swipe, and also puts up a hell of a fight against Garchomp. Mega Garchomp at that. And Mega Garchomp is a beast. Now, I have spoken in a YouTube short about, sarcastically, comedic fashion, the power of Mega Garchomp. And Mega Garchomp fires off the most powerful and well-animated Draco Meteor I've ever seen in the entire anime. And Haxorus going toe-to-toe, blow for blow with Psycho Cut versus Dragon Claw, these two dragons going back and forth, I think really highlights how well Iris has grown as a battler with her Haxorus, how well, she has become an excellent Pokemon trainer at that. And what really speaks volume is her trust in Haxorus. The way that she bonds with Haxorus mid-battle, the way that she puts her faith in Haxorus to defeat Garchomp, and I think it's beautiful. I think it's really beautiful. Even Cynthia acknowledges her growth, that she has come so far that she's not the same trainer she met in Unova. And these two ladies have such history together, not the most like other trainers, but the execution on this battle was absolutely beautiful. I don't think they could have done, maybe they could have done a little better, because Journeys doesn't have a good writing staff. They didn't write the series well. But for this episode of the Masters 8, I think they nailed it. And I think they did really good. It's the third best battle, like I said, in the Masters 8 tournament. I think the bond shown off between Iris and Haxorus is immaculate. And they do, on top of it, not only, even though Iris loses, she loses with pride, dignity, respect. She loses with grace. She loses with elegance. And it's a beautiful loss. She goes down swinging, knocking out the Draco Meteor with Dragon Pulse. And I believe that this tactic is what she wanted to use when Ash used Draco Meteor against her when they battled prior in the series. So now we see that tactic come to fruition. And even though she lost, again, goes down swinging like a champion, like a girl boss. And I think it's beautiful. It's poetic in a way. And even Cynthia acknowledges her growth. And Iris's loss highlights Cynthia's strength in a positive way. This is the type of loss in champion battle that should have happened between Alon versus Leon. Alon should have been able to knock out two of Leon's Pokemon, and it should have come down to Charizard versus Charizard, but it should have been guns a-blazing, going down swinging, and give Alon a dignifying end, like Iris got. And Iris just didn't get that. Alon didn't get that. Iris did, and I think it's absolutely beautiful what they did with Iris versus Cynthia. Now we're going to go into Lance versus Diantha, and I don't have any gripes with Lance versus Diantha. It was really just a basic video game battle. It was, it was by the book. It was textbook. It was attack versus defense. It was power versus strategy. And, while it was fine, just Lance had Hydreigon go up against Gardevoir? Why? Why? I don't know what this man was thinking. I don't know. But nonetheless, it's not like it was horrible. Lance played the best he could. Diantha played the best she could. Diantha just outsmarted Lance. She just had better tactics. She had better strategies. She had better counters. She had everything better. She had this battle in the bag, and they had a whole episode dedicated, to them. And, there's not much I could say that, that was really wrong with this battle. They could have done more. They could have had more creative strategies, more creative liberty, rather than just, oh, he's going to attack. He's going to use power and attack strength and just go full force. And then Diantha's going to use these strategies and play defensively. And there wasn't much thought to it, in my opinion. It felt almost like a stagnant, vanilla, like old school Pokemon battle when they weren't making as many creative strategies back in the day. And again, for the Masters 8 tournament, why are we not making more strategic plays, more creative plays, more tactile decisions, in our battles? But then let's get to Ash versus Leon, not Ash versus Leon, Ash versus Steven, where, oh boy, Ash should not have gotten to the semifinals. Let me be clear on that. Ash should not have gotten to the semifinals. Because let's break down Ash versus Steven. It is Aggron versus Gengar. It is Metagross versus Dracovish. We have Cradily versus Gengar, and Pikachu versus Metagross. Now, prior to this, Ash had undergone training with Paul to get ready for the Masters 8. And one of these battles included battling his own Metagross. Paul got a Metagross so that Ash could train against it. And in that battle, Gengar used its brand new move, a Will-O-Wisp, in order to cause burn damage to be able to beat Metagross. That did not matter in the Masters 8. It bared no fruit for Ash's battle in the Masters 8 against Steven. Because Dracovish can counter Metagross. Okay, great. Paul sees that. But then he switches into Aggron. Gengar causes burn damage to Aggron, fights back with Dazzling Gleam against Rock Tomb. And the burn damage, so freaking weird. Aggron suffered burn damage, twice? I think. The real way to do burn damage was showed off in the Sinnoh League. Burn damage, even throughout the Diamond and Pearl series, and yes, I'm going to glaze the hell out of Diamond and Pearl because Diamond and Pearl did things right. Diamond and Pearl had peak writing, but the burn damage for Aggron was just ridiculous. Ash was relying on the burn damage to defeat Aggron. He literally says it's still standing after he did the burn damage. So bro was fully reliant upon Will-O-Wisp in order to defeat Steven. If your only way that you think you're going to beat one of, if not all of Steven's Pokemon is to use Will-O-Wisp, a status move, which will cause damage over time, you are not ready to defeat a champion. You are not ready to defeat the Hoenn champion. You are not ready to defeat anybody in the Masters 8 if you're relying on a status move. And I don't know why Ash was so dependent on Will-O-Wisp. He has other moves in his arsenal. He has Pokemon that have battle experience in his arsenal, yet let's rely on Will-O-Wisp. And I don't think that was good. I think it highlights how insignificant Ash's skills are as a trainer compared to the other members of the Masters 8 are. I think it highlights Ash's severe unreadiness for the Masters 8. I think it highlights and puts in perspective how unqualified he was for the Masters 8, since he was so reliant on Will-O-Wisp. And then, of course, Aggron goes down from the burn for plot armor, and then, the only real good portion of this battle was Gengar and Pikachu versus Cradily. That was really the only good part of this battle, because there was back and forth, there was strategy involved, there were moves being blocked and counters being involved. But then we get to Ash and his Pikachu versus Steven and his Metagross. Mega Metagross at that. Mega Metagross was running circles around Pikachu. Pikachu could not land a single Thunderbolt, and then apparently out of nowhere it can redirect the lightning bolts from 10 million volt Thunderbolt. So 3 out of the 7 hit Metagross. It's still standing, and then 1 Iron Tail wraps up the job. Mind you, Steel, I'm pretty sure, does resist electric attacks. Now, I'm not Animati, guys, Animati. Yum, yum, yum. Love that tea. Elderberry this time. Elderberry for stress and immune support. With honey. But let's continue talking about Pikachu versus Metagross. Because majority of Anipoke fans will agree that Ash should have lost against Steven. Mind you, Dracovish has gone down to Metagross and whoever defeated Dracovish. I think it was Metagross. No, it was Aggron. Excuse me, I misspoke. So he beats Aggron, he beats Cradilly. Gengar and Dracovish go down. Pikachu can't land any Thunderbolts. Apparently redirecting lightning bolts from 10 million volt Thunderbolt is possible now, when he's never done that before. They all fire off simultaneously at once. The strategy just wasn't there for Ash. Steven had more strategy than Ash, and Ash was relying on unpredictability, which, not a bad thing, but he leaned too much into it. It's like Joey relying on luck too much for his own cards in his own deck, from the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. And I don't understand how the writers wrote this debut battle of Ash and the Masters 8 so poorly. He was relying on the plot armor. Metagross is a pseudo-legendary, now Mega Evolved, and happens to lose to a redirected Z move that struck with half the power, and then 1 Iron Tail. Mind you, Steven has also battled the same Primal Graban and Primal Kyogre that Alon did, and the same Mega Metagross. And he's gone toe-to-toe with Alon's Mega Charizard X. So why, in God's name, why on earth did they allow him to lose to Ash's Pikachu? Oh, because plot, that's why. Steel resists Steel too. Why was Iron Tail the one to knock it out? I mean, I guess it's got to be something. But they could have done better. I feel they fumbled Ash's first battle. I feel they really fumbled it. I feel round 1 of the Masters 8 really got fumbled. They didn't know how to execute these battles, aside from Iris versus Cynthia. And again, it's not really what happened is the problem. It's how it happened. All of these champions have immense history, even if it's one series. Steven has history from the XY anime because he barely showed up in AG. Diantha has history from the XY anime. Leon has had history for the entire series, and, he suffers from inconsistent writing from his own series. Ash has 25 plus years of history, and in this tournament, to end all tournaments, they dropped the bar. They dropped the ball. The standard was low to begin with, and it suffers from all the journey's L's that come prior to this. And, let's go back to the notes, because I've got a myriad of notes here about how bad the Masters 8 was actually written. So, of course I've discussed Ash versus Steven. I've discussed Iris versus Cynthia, Lance versus Diantha, Alon versus Leon. But now, what I also want to highlight is that on top of wasted potential from Hop, wasted potential between character interactions, there is also the fact that it feels like Kalos League 2.0. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean when I say Kalos League 2.0? When I say Kalos League 2.0, it's the fact that it had lack of focus. It was rushed in certain areas. It didn't hold the narrative weight that it should have. And the Masters 8, when you think of the Masters 8, what do you think of? Let me know. Be honest. What do you think of? I'm sure you're saying Ash versus Leon. I'm sure you're saying Leon versus, not Leon, but, his Charizard. I'm sure you're thinking of Charizard versus Pikachu. I'm sure you're thinking of Lucario versus Garchomp. I'm sure you're thinking of Ash versus Cynthia. You might be thinking of Iris versus Cynthia as well, because it's the third best battle. Now, you might be thinking of Alon versus Leon because it was, so bad. But again, like the Colors League, we've got 3 battles. 3! 3! That really define the Masters 8. 3 battles that really put into perspective what the Masters 8 was. And that is Ash versus Cynthia, Ash versus Leon, and Iris versus Cynthia. So again, do you really have a good league? I mean, we have a substantial league because more battles were displayed on screen this time. But we don't have a substantial league, if that makes sense. You following me? It's not substantial. It's not deep. It's not developed. It's not written properly. The execution is on the poor side of things. And when we're talking about execution, you need to execute these battles in a way where it holds weight. It drives the narrative forward. It progresses character development. It progresses story and plot. Not for the sake of those things, but because it's done in a dynamic way, in a way that gives meaning to the characters. And it's not done in that way. Again, Alon versus Leon, rushed and crammed among so many other things in the debut of the Masters 8 tournament. Iris versus Cynthia, great, had room to breathe. Strong development. Ash versus Steven, executed poorly. Lance versus Diantha, executed fine, but very stale, if I'm being honest. Then let's get to... Ooh, y'all remember this one. Let's talk about Leon versus Diantha. Let's talk about Lance versus Diantha. It didn't happen. Now you're probably in the comments like, what do you mean it didn't happen? It did happen. It was on screen. We saw Gardevoir versus Charizard. Exactly my point. We saw Diantha and her Gardevoir versus Leon and his Charizard. That's all we saw from that battle. That's all we saw. It still boggles my mind. The XY erasure, the XY disrespect is mind-boggling, and I don't understand it. Again, I'm not here to glaze XY. I'm not here to say it's the best series. I'm not here to say, oh, these characters are phenomenal. I'm here to say that it's disrespectful. It strips these characters of their dignity. It strips them of their prowess as trainers, as champion-level trainers nonetheless, all for the sake of literally glazing Leon. Because he's meant to be the strongest trainer in the world. We get that. We as fans get that. It's been established since his introduction in Season 1 of Pokemon Journeys. It's been established since this dude was first on the screen defeating people like Lance in the last World Coronation Series, or Pokemon World Championships, which sounds much better. We know that. We know he's the strongest trainer. We don't need Alon being disrespected and his Charizard being one-shot to reinforce that. We don't need to see Diantha, the Kalos champion, being swept by Leon's Rillaboom to reinforce that. We don't need to see Gardevoir defeat Rillaboom and then get trounced by Charizard to reinforce that. We already know that everyone wants to defeat Leon. We already know Leon is the goal, the main obstacle people want to defeat. We know he's the strongest. We know because it was just reinforced in the opening ceremony. So why have Diantha trashed in such a way, disrespected in such a way, where 5 of her Pokemon are beaten by Leon's Rillaboom? This is an atrocious action from the writers. This is tragic if you think about it. Yeah, Gardevoir put up a good fight. Yeah, Gardevoir had some good tactics, and Diantha was doing the best she could. But for Leon to only lose 2 Pokemon, and for Diantha to be down to her last Pokemon, and that's all we see on screen because for whatever reason, the writers thought it would be a good idea to spend the first half of the episode talking with some kids about freaking Eldegoss and Gossifleur. Who authorized this? Who asked for this? Nobody asked for this. In the middle of the most anticipated tournament in Pokemon history, let's spend some time talking about Eldegoss and Gossifleur with these little kids we have never met before. And they dragged Cynthia into this. They dragged Cynthia into this for no good reason. It is absurd that they did this. You remember that episode from the Unova League where Axew got lost? And we all hated that episode with a burning passion? That episode is better than this. It is better than this half-baked episode focusing on Eldegoss and Gossifleur with these random kids, and then skipping most of Leon versus Diantha, only focusing on the tail end of the battle, and not giving it the full attention it deserves. That Axew episode is better than this, and I will stand on that. Because at least with that episode, we focused on a Pokemon that we have already known. Okay? You know, if Axew's lost, if Axew is doing some silly antics in, this random league episode, at least I'm with a Pokemon I know. At least I'm with a Pokemon I care about. At least we are not really disrespecting anyone in that way. It's a harmless filler episode, in all honesty. And I've ranked on the episode. Ranked? Ragged? What? I don't know what the word is. But I've talked smack about that episode before, because it's a bad episode. Why have this random filler in the middle of the Unova League? Not necessary. When a random filler episode is better than an actual legit league episode, we have a massive problem. This episode should have been better than that Axew episode, and it's not. Again, we're focusing on Eldegoss with random kids, because that's something we need to focus on right now. And then we don't even see all of Leon versus Diantha. What we got was cool, but that's all. It was cool. It was fine. It wasn't great. I'd say, honestly, it was pretty bad. But Diantha put up a fight, but got horribly disrespected in the process. And that's the main problem with the Masters 8 tournament. And the main problem with Pokemon Journeys is they can't focus their writing. They cannot focus it. The Masters 8 lacked focus. It lacked depth. It lacked substance. And the only real good part of the entire Masters 8 tournament is the semifinals of Ash vs. Cynthia and the finals of Ash vs. Leon. So really, it really might be the worst league because we have two battles, that define the Masters 8. It's two battles. Because most anipoke discourse, when we talk about the Masters 8, if we're not trash-talking Leon versus Diantha, and if we're not trash-talking round 1, we're praising Ash vs. Cynthia and Ash vs. Leon. And that's it. It's two battles that define this league. Worse than the 3 battles that define the Kalos League. And how did they write the worst league in Pokemon history? And I can put this tweet on screen from my boy Pokeferlax, where he has the Masters 8 ranked as, I believe, the 3rd worst league ever in Pokemon history. Valid. Very much valid. And I wouldn't criticize anyone who says it's the worst league. Because you gotta think. It's not just a self-contained league. It's not self-contained. It spans 20 plus years of build-up and character development across multiple series. It's not just, this is the Unova League, self-contained within the Unova region. It's not just the Kalos League. It's not just the Alola League. It's not just the Johto League where, only these people are. It has champions from every region. It has people that came in from a special like Alan. It has a traveling companion in Iris who has now become champion. It has so much, or should have had so much narrative weight, and they fumbled it. The writing of the Pokemon anime at this point in its lifespan, for Pokemon Journeys, for the Masters 8, the way it was written, it could not sustain the weight that it was meant to carry. Let that sink in. The Masters 8 could not sustain the weight of the series that had been building towards this tournament and it could not sustain the weight and the level of substance and depth that it was meant to carry and that it should have carried. These battles should have been more well animated. They should have been more dynamic, more character interaction before and after every battle, and there needed to be a level of narrative weight that just falls flat for a lot of these battles. And the only ones that really hit are Ash versus Cynthia and Ash versus Leon, the two battles that define the Masters 8. And when we talk about Ash versus Cynthia and Ash versus Leon, a lot of times we talk about how Ash should have lost, because Cynthia owned the battle for majority of the battle. She was calculated. She was a little cold, actually, in her calculations. She was using a Pokemon that Ash had really only battled once, and that was back in DP, and that was Spiritomb. Spiritomb knocked out 3 of Ash's Pokemon, Gengar, Dragonite, and Pikachu, knocking out 2 of Ash's Pokemon that can use a battle mechanic. Then he's got to rely on Dracovish, Sirfetch'd, and Lucario, which now we're like, okay, dang, his big hitters are gone, aside from Lucario. How's he going to come out on top? How is Ash going to win this battle? It really was an uphill battle for Ash when he was battling Cynthia. And I'm not saying that's bad. That was actually good, in my opinion. But the way he lost so many Pokemon so quickly, good to highlight Cynthia's strength, bad to highlight how unqualified Ash is for the Masters 8. But this was done tastefully, so this is fine. This is fine. Then we have Ash versus Leon, where Leon says, hey, you can use all your battle mechanics. You can use them all. I want to battle Z-moves. I want to battle Gigantamax. I want to battle Mega Evolutions. What'd that sound like to you? Plot armor, right? Is what we're going to say? Well, it was allowed, so let's not say... Okay, we could say plot armor. If you don't want to say plot armor, I don't blame you, because Leon allowed it, and then the refs allowed it. But let's discuss the strategies involved. Leon had coverage moves. He had his abilities activate. He had a Libero Cinderace. He was more strategic, more planned, more calculated, probably even more so than Cynthia. And Ash just went in guns a-blazing, said, Pikachu, you're first on the field. And while Ash did adapt to Cynthia's battling style, while he did adapt to Leon's battling style, it goes to show that Ash relies too much on unpredictability, that he rarely goes into a battle with a strategy. And that's what cost him. Granted, he still won, and Ash versus Charizard at the end was peak. You know, it's amazing. But we're not here to talk about what's amazing. We're here to talk about what didn't work. What didn't work was choosing spectacle over writing actually good battles. What didn't work was choosing glorifying Leon over actually building characters that, building battles that could stack up to highlighting Leon's strength while also highlighting the strength and the history of the Pokemon anime. The Masters 8 is meant to celebrate 25 plus years of Pokemon anime history. And what it does is really, for the most part, kind of craps on that history. It kind of undermines all that history in a sense. And, again, there was good execution where it mattered. They stuck the landing for the last 2 battles of the Masters 8. But again, you're defining your league by now just 2 battles. 2 6-on-6 battles. That does not make a league. It does not make a substantial league at that. And when your focus is lacking, when your writing is subpar, you end up with one of the worst leagues in the Pokemon anime's history. And I stand on that. It's like calling Aim to be a Pokemon Master, Aim to be Mid, which is a valid name, a valid critique of that series, of that 11-episode epilogue. I really want to speak more positively about the Masters 8 tournament. But like the thumbnail and title suggest, that is how Pokemon wrote one of the worst leagues in Pokemon anime history. And it's just for everything this tournament was building to, for everything that came before, for all the history, all the battles, all the relationships that we have grown to come to love, get attached to, become familiar with. It's as if the Masters 8 tournament kind of made it mean nothing. Again, Ash versus Cynthia sticks the landing. Ash versus Leon sticks the landing. Iris versus Cynthia sticks the landing. Lance versus Diantha, it was a battle. Ash versus Steven does not stick the landing. Alon versus Leon does not stick the landing. Diantha versus Leon, it was half a battle. I just don't know what was going on in the writers' heads. Because even though there was back-end production issues, even before those back-end production issues happened, there was still writing flaws in the story of Pokemon Journeys before that even happened. And it shows now even more so in the Masters 8. Had the series been written better, we probably would have gotten a better Masters 8 tournament. But, speaking of the Masters 8 tournament, why didn't Ash use his veteran Pokemon for the Masters 8? That is going to be the topic of our next segment, so let's dive into the Twin Leaf Journal. In this week's episode for the Twin Leaf Journal, we're going to discuss why Ash didn't use his reserve Pokemon and veteran Pokemon for the Masters 8 tournament. Something he should have done, and something he should have done for the entirety of the series. Not to say that he couldn't or shouldn't have caught new Pokemon in Pokemon Journeys, but it's the fact that his old Pokemon are there just for moral support. Just for training his new Pokemon, mentoring them, and then not doing anything. Infernape had this one episode early on where he wanted to battle Moltres, and we see, for the first time in years, Ash command one of his older Pokemon. He commands Infernape to battle Moltres, and they battle hard. They put their hearts in that battle, and while Gary kind of interrupts that battle, it gave us so much hope that maybe Infernape would rejoin his team at the time. That maybe Infernape would be used later in the Masters 8 tournament. But, alas, none of that comes to pass. And, oh man, I like my tea. What I want to highlight, and I have these tweets saved in the community, the first one I have highlighted is one showing off Pikachu using Counter Shield against Cynthia. And that was great. That was a great callback. I love that they brought back the Counter Shield. What would have been better? Bringing back Buizel and Infernape, who also know how to use Counter Shield, or bringing back any of his veteran Pokemon and having them learn how to use Counter Shield. That's what would have been better. Even Leon uses the Counter Shield, but why not have other Pokemon come back and use it? And oh my goodness, speaking of Ash versus Cynthia, where was Infernape? Where was my boy Infernape? Nowhere to be seen. Just at home at Oaks Lab watching it on TV. Why? It's a very solid question. It's a very justified question. And I'm going to bring up another tweet that says, this comes from my friend Pokeferlax. This says, my issue is about the writing decision as a whole though. I didn't want Ash to use just his JN Pokemon all series, then switch to reserves in the Masters 8. I wanted him to use a mix for the entire series. Use new Pokemon and reserves throughout the whole PWC. That was the dream. That's a dream many of us shared for the Masters 8. We thought, oh, he's back in Kanto. He has access to Oaks Lab, he's going up against these champions, these trainers from around the world, and he's going to need his strongest Pokemon. Where's Sceptile? Where's Charizard? Where's potentially Bulbasaur and Squirtle? Where is Crocodile, Lycanroc, Greninja? Where are Pokemon like Swellow and Buizel and Gliscor? These Pokemon should have been here for the entire series. And let's highlight something else as well. There's also Truly Wild. This comes from Blast _Chance on Twitter. Truly wild how I still see people insist the JN team were the only ones good enough for the Masters 8 when the whole point of his rivalry with Paul was to prove all his Pokemon have equal potential. That was the message of Diamond and Pearl, that you could win with your favorite Pokemon, akin to Karen of the Johto Elite Four in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Gold Silver Crystal, saying that weak Pokemon, strong Pokemon, that's the perception of selfish trainers. True Pokemon trainers win with their favorite Pokemon and the ones they love. That was the message of Diamond and Pearl. And I love it. That was the whole basis surrounding Ash and Paul's rivalry. Yet, only Dragonite, Gengar, Dracovish, Sirfetch'd, Lucario, and Pikachu were considered strong enough to participate in the Masters 8 tournament. Why? His other Pokemon could do it. Greninja, Naganadel, Melmetal, Lycanroc, Incineroar probably could do it. Charizard, Sceptile, Crocodile. Pokemon like that would have been great to use in the Masters 8 tournament. And the entirety of the PWC as well. But we don't get that. We don't. And it's a shame, really. It's a shame that his veteran Pokemon are only there on the sideline, morally supporting, cheering him on. And that's great. I'm glad that they're supporting him. But they should have done more. They should have been used more. Like, Ash, if Journeys was rewritten in a much better way, and my friend Zaktoshi has made an entire Sword and Shield rewrite where this does happen, but he reframes the Masters 8, the Galar League anyway. He reframes it differently so it's more traditional, but he makes it work. He gives Ash a new team and makes him use his veterans in the Galar League, and that works perfectly. My friend Zano made a Sword and Shield rewrite, and I believe in his series, Ash did not catch a full new team. I believe he still had a Gengar, Lucario, and Dragonite, but Ash uses all of his reserves throughout that entire series, and that is what we should have gotten. That is what should have happened. Let's highlight some more tweets that I had found, which this comes from a Kilvers, our friend Annet, and she says, also here, when they agreed to battle, Paul said, however, you will only use Pokemon for the Masters 8, Pokemon you intend to use in the Masters 8 tournament, which once again confirms that for the Masters 8, Ash uses only the JN team, without switching to old Pokemon. Yes, we know that Ash has been using only his new teams to win at League since the Unova League, but here is the perfect moment for, again, history to be made. 25 plus years of anipoke history, but you don't use any of your old Pokemon. In the episode Rivals Friends Lend Me Your Strength, where Paul was training Ash for the Masters 8, all his old Pokemon were training the new team. We have, I believe Oshawott and Sceptile and Bulbasaur, they were going toe-to-toe with, I believe, Sirfetch'd. Then we have Hawlucha, Heracross, and Weasel sparring with Lucario. All of Ash's flying types are helping out Dragonite. Dracovish is chilling with, I believe, Kingler or Glalie, something. And his Pokemon are just chilling. They're vibing with his old Pokemon. The new team mixing with the old teams. And that episode is great. It's one of the best in Pokemon Journeys. But that episode highlights the poor writing of the rest of the series. Which, yes, the episode when it is self-contained is great because it reminds me of that episode in Hoenn where it's the right place and the right time or the right mime. But that's when his Hoenn team meets all of Ash's old Pokemon. And that's what we should have gotten earlier in the series. Ash went back to Oak's lab plenty of times. Ash should have been using his veteran Pokemon, and he doesn't. Let's see, what else can we highlight? Again, I'm going to put on screen Pokeferlax's ranking of the leagues, and Masters 8 is ranked at the third worst, only above Unova and Kanto, and I mean, is it really hard to beat those? Is it hard to beat those leagues? Not really. So that's not saying much for the Masters 8. There was so much opportunity for Ash to use his veterans throughout the PWC. He should have been using Bulbasaur, Squirtle from the very beginning, Pokemon like Swellow, Corphish, Pokemon like Gibble, letting them shine, giving chances for some of them to evolve, learn new moves. But Journeys just fumbles everything. It fumbles the bag, it drops the ball. And it makes the series suffer. It makes it suffer. It makes Ash vs. Leon suffer, because we could have seen maybe Dragonite and Lucario stay, but we could have seen Charizard versus Charizard. We could have seen Lycanroc and Sceptile step up to the world stage. Infernape should have battled Cynthia's Garchomp, not Lucario. And it's really a shame that his old Pokemon are nothing more than cheerleaders in Pokemon Journeys. That Ash only wanted to use his new Pokemon for these monumentally significant battles. And that really drags the series down. So, for everything that Pokemon Journeys tried to do, tried to execute, it was very poor. It was very poor, and the lack of Ash using his veteran Pokemon throughout the entirety of the series, when they gave us a glimpse of hope in the beginning, it drags down the series, and it drags down the Masters 8 tournament. So to wrap up my thoughts on the Masters 8 tournament, we have a rushed tournament, we have a tournament that lacks focus, we have a tournament that just slanders and essentially disrespects years of anipoke history, erases XY history, disrespects XY characters like Alana and Diantha, and really just, it can't sustain the weight that it should have. Going into this tournament, and yes, you could argue expectations were high. You could argue that we expected too much. We thought too much about it. We wanted too much as anipoke fans. You can argue that all you want. You can argue it day in and day out. To a certain degree. You are right if you think that. To a certain degree. But for the fans who've been around since day one, for the fans that understand the history, for the fans that expected so much, for the fans that have seen Ash's journey from beginning to end, for the fans that bonded with these characters, saw the relationships grow, the Masters 8 really took away that development. It took away that substance that these characters gave us over the years, and the Masters 8 needed more time to breathe. It also doesn't help that in the random middle part of the Masters 8, we got these random episodes focusing on Chloe and Professor Cerise. Who the hell cares about them? Nobody. That's who. I still cannot fathom why they were included in the Masters 8. They should have been before the Masters 8. They should have been at the beginning of the series. There was no need to include them there. So that ruins the pacing that was driving the Masters 8 forward, and kind of just brings it to a halt. It brings it to a halt and just ruins the flow of the Masters 8. We don't need to talk about Chloe. Chloe don't even do nothing for the series. She don't even do nothing. Professor Cerise don't even do nothing. So why are we focusing on them? They don't need to be here. I love my tea. But, I'm yapping. But I love to yap about things like this. Because it's important to understand that if you want to have a great Pokemon anime, if you want to have a great anime in general, a great story nonetheless, you need proper pacing. You need proper pacing. You need proper attention and focus on the things that matter. You need to respect your characters. And Pokemon Journeys, the Masters 8, it didn't understand that. It didn't understand that at all. It didn't understand the weight these characters held. It didn't understand. It's like giving your 5-year-old a 10-pound weight and asking them to hold it for 13 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. They're not going to. A 5-year-old's not built to hold that weight, and the Masters 8 wasn't built to hold the weight that it was meant to walk in with. And, we as the fans understood the weight that, oh my goodness, we can get an Ash versus Alana rematch. We can get a Diantha versus, Leon battle. There were so many ways the tournament could have gone. And at every opportunity, the Masters 8 just continued to fumble. It fell down. And it wasn't a good league. Again, when you have two battles that are the most memorable, and people don't even want to talk about round one or Diantha versus Leon, you don't have a substantial league. You've got a collection of battles, is what you have. And they could have done better. They should have done better. You know? We were 25 years into the anime, and they just could have done better. They should have done better for the fans. People that, oh, my favorite champion's coming back, and you treat them this way. So for lack of good writing, for lack of pacing, good pacing, for a lack of experienced writing, just there was so much that the Masters 8 could have improved upon. And they fumbled. And to this day, the Masters 8 tournament is one of the worst Pokemon leagues in Pokemon history. But let me know in the comments, am I wrong? Am I right? Where do you stand on the Masters 8? What battles did you enjoy the most? And let me know what writing choices they could have made to make this league better. I could yap all day about this, but you let me know your thoughts in the comments. But I certainly do believe that the Masters 8 is one of the worst Pokemon leagues in the Pokemon anime history. And until next time, Pokemon champions, train hard, and I'll catch you guys later.